Okay, we're up to page 10 of my 2015 article on topics for music education praxis, the possibility of eco-literate music pedagogy. Natural sounds inspiring pedagogy. Sheena's vignette. An elementary school music teacher, Sheena takes her music class, ages 6 to 11, on an afternoon field trip to a local park. Sheena gives students the task of listening to nature, meditating, labeling all the sounds that they hear as nouns and or adjectives, representing what they hear through creative notation, and considering how they might compose music that captures nature's expressive potential. Upon returning to the classroom, Sheena guides her students to consider the sounds they heard, natural sounds, human and industrial sounds affecting the ecology of their local park. From this activity arises a conversation about non-human life, about nature and humankind's impact on the ecological health of this park and the global environment. Incorporating sounds of nature, humans and industrial things, the clanking of factories, the buzzing of power lines, and the honking of cars, the students compose music that expresses musically their impression of the ecology of their local park. Finally, considering the ecological crises faced by humankind, the students give their compositions titles which are codified into themes for classroom dialogue about ecological issues throughout the semester. In this vignette, Sheena is providing an opportunity for students to compose music by drawing from the abundance of music's nature unveils. In particular, the students are learning both how music is constructed and why. As Rogalski wrote, quote, "When students compose, they not only learn how music is put together, but also why it is created in the first place. That is, what music is good for," end quote. He points out that sounds become music when organized for particular human uses, such as listening, dancing, celebrating, worshiping. It may also be beneficial for music teachers to take an ecocentric, ecology-centered view of music, that these sounds are organized for human uses and for non-human uses, such as the mating rituals of birds and pollination for plant life. The role, then, of the teacher and students in this vignette is the role of humans as nature's reflective beings. Such an understanding does not lessen the importance of music in humans, and nature's meaning construction process of music, but provides an additional non-anthropocentric, non-human-centered way of reflection. Another important aspect of the previous vignette is the rootedness of place, a local park, to Sheena's music pedagogy. Her pedagogy begins and is rooted in place, and from the experience with place, her students create music that is inspired by the sound ecology of their community and for an understanding of local and global issues through dialogue. As Duvall and Sessions wrote, quote, "Many environmental groups cultivate a sense of place," end quote, this leads to ecological consciousness. Such ecological consciousness might lead to change through the creation of coalitions, protests, green politics, spiritual expressions, and questioning technology. Such an ecological sense of place can be cultivated even in large cities. What might be most important about place and ecological consciousness are the virtues and ideals of staying home, connected to commons, of caring for the places we belong to and those that belong to us. Prakash and Stuchel. Returning then to the question, what might music education for ecological literacy be like? Place, virtue, such as Illich's order and direction of action informed by tradition, bounded by place and qualified by choices made within habitual reach of the actor, and Prakash's and Stuchel's virtues and ideals of staying home, and connectedness to place, should be essential concerns of music education for ecological literacy. But what type of knowledge cultivates human sense of place in an age of knowledge as science, which produces neutral and therefore placeless and generalizable knowledge. Okay. So, music education for ecological literacy can be like place, virtue, and connectedness to place. So place, virtue, and connectedness. Okay. Next section, Indigenous knowledge, and this was pretty distinctive at this point in our field's history as well. I'm so glad so many more people are discussing Indigenous ways of knowing, right? But in 2015, there was not a lot at all. And so I'm glad I was able to bring this in. Okay, Indigenous knowledge. Learning from Indigenous knowledge can be the key to cultivating a sense of place through music education. Somali and Kinchalo describe Indigenous knowledge as native ways of knowing. Indigenous knowledge reflects the dynamic way in which the residents of an area have come to understand themselves in relationship to their natural environment and how they organize folk knowledge of the flora and fauna, cultural beliefs, and a history that enhance their lives. Of particular importance to music teachers is the dynamism of place, beliefs, and histories of Indigenous knowledge as ways of thinking. Educational philosopher Madhusuri Prakash contrasts science with Indigenous knowledge systems. While science claims to be neutral, neutered from culture or gender, among other non-universalizables, Indigenous knowledge systems are rooted in culture and gender. Quote, ethnicity, place, soil, and other elements localize, confine, and define Indigenous knowledge systems. End quote. Postmodern critiques problematize scientific thinking as being connected to power and is revealed in the rampant destruction of Indigenous knowledge systems throughout the post-World War II project of global development. For Prakash, ecological literacy begins by recognizing the importance of the epistemologies of non-modern or Indigenous peoples, and its roots knowing to place. Music education learning, knowing, rooted in place then, can help students find connections to culture because Indigenous knowledge systems contain localized understandings that are often rooted in musics of people. Indigenous knowledge systems also include localized musics, whether folk or commercial music appropriated for local uses, that are rooted in place. Clemente Abraqua shared examples of Indigenous music education in Africa, the aim of which is to impact social, cultural knowledge and skills to the young of the community. The author continues, environmental factors greatly influence the development and use of musical instruments, dance forms, and song texts. And he continues that wars, famine, interactions of different cultures, and colonialism have changed Indigenous societies in Africa. He shares 3 environmental songs that honor Mother Earth and seek to protect the environment from abuse. With Abraqua's writing in mind, ethnomusic educators have an opportunity to find Indigenous songs used around the world in order to provide music education students with an opportunity to make connections with the other, people of different cultures, races, religions, etc., who may have different ways of living than the students, and begin to realize global ecological consciousness through a more Indigenous way of thinking. Describing another music tradition, Matsunobu's dissertation about Japanese shakuhachi as holistic and organic, which he connected to instrument construction, music praxis, can provide music teachers with insight. Shakuhachi practitioners spend time in nature and then craft their instruments from a piece of bamboo. According to the author, shakuhachi musical practices cultivate ecological and spiritual experiences for practitioners. Interestingly, historical music educator Saz Coleman seems to have made a connection between instrument making and nature. I believe that through making instruments from natural materials, children may connect meaningfully to nature. Students might also create instruments from unnatural materials and might provide fodder for discussion about the place of people in nature in ecologically sustaining or potentially corrupting ways. Connecting to nature through the act of instrument making can be one answer to the question, how can music education matter? But does this mean music education might become more spiritual to develop an eco-literate pedagogy? There we are at page 14. I'm going to stop there. In this last section, there's a lot, right? We're talking about epistemology, so ways of knowing. So more than just what the ethno-music educators were doing, which was bringing in songs from other cultures, often uprooted completely, or bringing in uprooted suburbanites, right, who they have dissected from their culture to be the token, right, the representative. Now you represent all of West Africa, you who want to get back but can't because it's so expensive. Whereas Aberquois points out how, right, this music is greatly influenced by the development and use of music elements, dance forms, and song text connected to the environment specific to each group, right? Each ethnos within, right? And so much is focused on Mother Earth. In fact, when I look at around the world, I see every culture having something good to say about how to live well and sustainably in a place, except for one, right? You know, except for one. And so many years of ethno-music education was just like washing ecological knowledge, ecological music, ecological knowledge out of all ethno-music, right? And then, such an important thing, right? And then Matsunobu's important work, his dissertation, right? And just this little part of it talking about the instrument making, going into nature with bamboo, and saying that that can help develop, right? So spiritual experiences with spiritual experience for the practitioners in nature, right? So important. And that also I saw in Sadis Coleman's 1920s and 30s pedagogy. You know, and instrument making doubly does this. Why? Because so much about what we have to teach and what we teach and what we're forced to teach and what we feel like we're forced to teach is about moving so fast. And if you slow kids down and let them try to make an instrument, even if they fail, they've wasted some time. You can only ruminate if you have time to waste. This is the difference between somebody who's factory labored to death and somebody that gets to be fully reflective. When we stop, we slow down, we allow our kids to be fully reflective. Okay, we'll start there next time.